successful business. And as a result, he was finding that other advisors would come to him keen to learn the secrets of his success. And he really enjoyed so much helping other advisors, he actually made a decision to do that on a full-time basis, sold his advice business and became a full-time consultant specialising in helping financial advice businesses. And he still consults to his own practice, his old practice. So Baz has literally worked with thousands of advisors over the years, and he's gathered so much data on advice practices, experimented with the data that he's got from those practices, and gleaned many insights, some of which he's going to share with us today. Now, I've heard him described as an advice nerd, and he tells me that financial advisors are his people. So welcome, Baz. We are so happy to have you here with us today.
Oh, look, it's absolutely a pleasure, Erica. Thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit with you guys my advice nerdiness.
Wonderful. So with that, let's kick off with our first polling question, as we're keen to learn what are the biggest internal hurdles you're facing in your practice currently. And then once the results are in, if they could be put up on screen so we can have a look, because I think it would be really interesting to see if there's any surprises there from Baz's experts' opinions. Okay, I was looking at two screens here. So it looks like, it's pretty evenly split. Spending time with the right clients, our revenue fee structures, and consistently demonstrating value to our clients. Baz, any surprises there?
Look, no, not really. I mean, I speak to advisors all day long. I'm connected to literally thousands of them through my various socials, and that, as I said, they're my people. So I'm having these conversations all day long, and that's pretty reflective of exactly the conversations that we have. I think, and we're going to get into it today, the value articulation and spending time with the right clients. It all stems from the same place. So I would say that most of us developed through being, experts in a field, financial advisors, but we never really had, a scientific, practical driven approach to our client engagement and human psychology. But those things are actually, make up the majority of the value we actually create through our specializations. So the same gaps I see across, all firms.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that helping advisors, helping clients make the right decisions is so important. So I think you and I have chatted beforehand, and one of the things that you've talked about is there's some fundamental building blocks that are really important to help advisors grow their businesses, and one of those is value proposition. I'd love to understand why it's important in your opinion.
Okay. So as far as value proposition goes, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised for me to say, look, it's at the center stone of what you're doing. How you articulate your value to clients determines, 1, are they willing to pay you? 2, how much they'll pay you? 3, how seriously they take what you're telling them, how closely they follow, the advice that you're giving them. So value proposition is really at the center of everything that you do. And yet often it's one of the areas where the least development has taken place, or the development is kind of accidental over time. So one of the things about value proposition, though, is that it doesn't stand alone. We talk about a thing called contextual sequence. So it needs to have some framing components that come with it. So, for example, most of you are familiar with the Simon Sinek start with why. So if you're articulating a value, you have a value proposition to a client, then it also needs to come with other things. You just have a standalone elevator pitch. So what's your why? What's your reason for doing this? What do you get out of your business? And you have to have the context between that and the value you create for your client. And so often we really don't see that happen when we're reviewing advisors' engagement methodology with their clients. So I would say value proposition is the most important thing to get right, but it's only part of a bigger ecosystem.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And so, in terms of when you've been talking to practices, are there many that don't have a value proposition in place?
Look, what I would say is that all businesses have a value proposition, right? They all have to do it. Otherwise, they would have no clients paying any dollars. What I would say, however, is that everyone that I've ever looked at can do it significantly better and have significant gaps in what they're doing. And the message that I want to stay here isn't to criticize advisors of any denomination whatsoever. It's to say that your value proposition is never done. Okay, don't ever think that you've got it right. If you think you've got it right and that you're nailing it, then you're creating roadblocks for yourself. You should always be looking to disrupt it. You should always be getting tighter, more articulate, understanding the key motivators and drivers and who your ideal clients are and how you're choosing to serve them. The emphasis, the nuance, all of it should continuously be getting better. And if it's not, then that's one of the primary reasons we see firms, really start to stagnate in their business. Once they think they've got it right is when the stagnation tends to kick in.
Yeah, so that constant evolution is really important. So I guess it'd be really great if you had a sort of an example of what a good value proposition looks like. Like, what are the components that should be in place?
Yeah, cool. All right. So before we jump into that, I want to kind of take a little second to set the scene on a couple of key points that are going to be very important for the questions that, we're going to be talking about today. So one of those things is subconscious versus conscious, right? And a corresponding and aligned perspective is also implied and explicit. So when we're talking about the value that financial advisors and planners deliver to their clients, most of the value is subconscious and it's only implied during the engagement, right? The conscious factors that are explicit is not the true value. It's more surface level. So advisors typically will emphasize, how much they're saving the client, what the returns may have been, what the technical improvements are because of the advice. Maybe they'll talk about I call it the very surface level goals-based planning. This is how much you need to get to retirement, or this is how much you need to continue retirement. And so it might be translated back to the client's emotive language, but in a surface level way. And the difference is the implied versus explicit. So something that's super important is that you are always, and this is the biggest gap that I see in client engagement across all professional services, not just financial advice, accountants, lawyers, etc., is understanding how to make the value that is implied explicit. And it's actually reasonably straightforward in as far as an act goes, but it's more complicated in the fact that we're not trained that way. We have fears, we have concerns, and so whenever I'm creating a radical kind of performance leap for an advisor, it's always helping them deal with how they're in their own way, which, by the way, is a good segue to talking about what's an example of a value proposition. Now, I'm just going to give you one off the top of my head, which is, coming from my previous financial advice business, okay? So what I was saying before is that value shouldn't come without context. So it needs to come with your reason. And I call this a general value proposition. So you need to have a general value proposition that when you're starting your engagement and you're setting the scene. By the end of a client engagement, before they agree to do anything with you, you also need to have a very specific one. What's the value in their specific emotionally resonant language and terms? So in other words, digging deep enough to get the true value to them, because it's never about money or returns or whatever, and it's never about the fears that they bring up in front. They're always just surface level things. So the deeper you go in that, the more you can get to the heart of the emotionally resonant component for clients. So in my previous business, if we were talking about my reason, again, it's been a while since I've talked to a financial planning client. It's important to understand for me that the reason I run this business is because I'm driven by creating moments of awareness for people. That does now, by the way. And because of that, I like the moment when I can help them see how they're in their their own way, see how they can achieve what it is that they really want, actually identify what it is that they really want, and then work with them to hold them to those things. But it's always the moments of awareness for me, and it's how those moments of awareness lead to people living their best life. Now, when that happens, I feel awesome. That's what drives me. It's what fulfills me. And it's the cornerstone of everything that I do. That's how I feel the most valuable as a person. Because of that, I've built a business where we work with clients and we stand beside them to partner with them. We challenge them. We keep them accountable to themselves. We help them realize what they can do and how they're in their own way. Because of these things, our clients are clearer, they feel more energized, they have more mojo, they're able to know the path that they're on, and they know they've got a trusted partner there beside them, helping them be objective about their own situation, taking the small steps, making the decisions necessary to get the best version of their life. So there's an example of a value proposition, okay? And an example from, my previous business. But then it doesn't stand alone either, right? So one of the things advisors don't do well is they don't also provide their expectations to clients. So you've got to give your reason, you have to give your value proposition in emotionally resonant language that comes from here, if not more than here. And then you also need to set your expectations. Advisors try too hard to get clients instead of making the clients try hard to get them. Okay? And you're the one providing all of the value to the clients, not the other way around. So how you communicate determines the perspective of your client. And that's why the value proposition and articulation is so important. So an example of expectations. Look, I don't do this for everyone. I'm not trying to do it for everyone. I only want to do it for people who I care about and who care about me. So we have a close relationship with our clients, but we expect them to take it seriously. We're here for them. We're going to invest our time and our resources and our expertise in helping you to have a better life. This isn't for us. Sure, we get reward out of it, and I've explained what that is. And yes, we will charge you for it, because we understand the value and because we can't do it if we don't charge you. But the reason we're doing it is to give you your best life outcome. So we're professional naggers. We will harass you. If we need to, we're going to protect you from bad decisions, and mostly that's protecting you from yourself. We expect you to take it seriously. And if you don't, we'll hold you accountable to those things. And if you're not willing to have a partner that's there to get you to where you want to be and to challenge you and push you and keep you accountable and objective to yourself, then we're not the people for you. So before we go any further, is that the kind of relationship you want to have? That's a very important question to ask in engagement sequencing. So I took a little bit longer to answer this question, as I said I would, Erica, because this is going to help set the scene for some of the other things that we'll talk about. So what's important about this is a lot of these things, my motivations, what I expect, what my terms are, the emotional value I create, would normally be implied. But now we're making it explicit at the start of the process. And this is really important. I mean, just these small things can have radical impacts on the profitability of a business. I know, because I play with this stuff all day long. Okay? So hopefully that's giving you a bit of an example at the same time.
No, for sure. It's like that explicit what value you're offering, and then explicitly what you're expecting from the client, because it's a true partnership. And I think your point about asking the right questions and really getting to the heart of what a client's trying to achieve, and it's not necessarily the best returns. They're on a journey to achieve a certain outcome. And it's a very personal thing, offering advice, very, very emotionally charged career, I think. And amazing how many times you go into an advisor's office and there's a box of tissues on the desk. And I know going through the advice process myself, I found it quite a confronting experience based on all the things that you've just unpacked there. There's just so much to it. And I think
Yeah, so just
you
to
did set the scene
summarize, and
really
just
nicely.
to quickly summarize for that for you, Erica, and I think it's an important point to make. You have to make it about the true subconscious drivers, not the surface level rational ones. If you are, you're
Yeah,
making your business more transactionary. You'll have more resistance to fees. Now, this isn't to say that part of what you offer isn't expert advice and technical superiority, or eh, better than better than everyone else portfolio, whatever, right? Just don't use that as your fundamental translator of value, because it will always create a much weaker business.
yeah, it's an output, not the main game, so to speak. And I think that that's a really nice segue into pricing models. So obviously, there's a whole different lot of ways that you can price your services. And I think this is a good opportunity to do our second poll, which I'm hoping we can put up on the screen, because I'd love to get an understanding of how the audience, which is all advisors, how they're actually pricing in their practices. And then we can perhaps keep talking, and we'll wait for the results to go through. I'll give people a bit more time this time to respond. But you've obviously spoken to thousands of advisors, Baz, worked with so many practices. What are some of the most successful pricing structures you've come across?
Yeah, you know what? Before we talk about the pricing structures, actually, as I was contemplating this question just before, I just wrote down a little bit of a definition, so we'll test it out.
Okay.
So, what's a good pricing model? One that charges enough with enough of the right people, right? So, obviously, you need a profitable, sustainable business. So, it creates sufficient price tension and allows for the introduction of additional value at additional commercial exchange. Okay, so any pricing model that does that and can work in any variable in any combination. What I would also say is that it should offer no surprises to a client. And now, I see this more often with accounting firms than I do financial advice firms, but no surprises to a client. People need to know in advance what they're paying for and what the value is. There should never be WIP, or work in progress, or fee lockup, or, in other words, don't do any work you haven't been paid for. So I'm a big fan of commencement payments on projects. So, we don't start work until you make an installment. So they're the key elements, I think, of a good pricing model. Now, if you were to ask me in the financial planning space, what's a rough overview of my preferences? Look, I generally speaking, and as I said, I'm speaking generally here because it can be varied depending on circumstances. But I like, for your base retainer fee, I like a semi-fixed model. So this is the work that we're doing for you this year. We look at it every year, and it should be an annual based agreement. So the big push since the Royal Commission and FOFA and all of that has been for annual agreements. I've been a big fan of them for 20 something years. So setting out the terms of the work that we need to do every year. Now, I think what's important is that so often advisors don't charge for the additional value. So, a complex year, clients coming into a retirement. So, they only change their base fee potentially when there's an increase in FUM, as an example. Now, not all advisors charge that way, but often they won't charge for those additional, areas. Or maybe there's a life circumstance with a client. So in every firm and every client base I've ever analyzed, which is lots of them, every year, roughly 25 to 35% of your clients will have specific life circumstances that they find a challenge. And if you can articulate how you can help them resolve them, would be willing to pay you to do it. And this is outside the box of normal financial planning. And most advisors will touch on those things, perhaps give value, but never go the whole way because they don't know how to charge for it. Okay?
So you're saying you need to be
huge,
really transparent in terms of the different, I guess, levels of service that you're giving. So, for example, that example that you've just given, you've got somebody transitioning perhaps into retirement, or something's happened and they need significantly more advice and more structuring than what you've done in the past. Do you then want to be radically transparent in terms of, we can do X, Y, and Z, and each of those components costs X, Y, and Z, and then put it back onto the client to determine whether they want that support or not? Or how does that work, do you think, in
Look,
best practice?
generally speaking, I would say that the advisor wants to be in control of being definitive about this is the way I think you should do it and this is the price. All right. I'm not a huge fan of giving, pricing options and letting the client choose. Now, you can talk your way through it as a conversation point before you've, reached it, and then be definitive about what it is that you're recommending. Now, there's a lot more I could talk about there. I could speak about that for days. So as far as pricing models go, yes, you need to be very clear, but you also need to make sure that you're charging for the extra work, right? And I know we've got other questions, so I'll just finish it with this. Think about you've got a builder coming into your home, right? He's doing an extension, okay? And so he's giving you a price. But then he's digging out the foundations for the extension and finds that he's hit bedrock, right? He's now got to drill it out. He doesn't just call in an excavator and, increase his cost by 10%. He says, look, there's bedrock here. We didn't know. This is the cost to you. Do you want to go ahead? What do you want to do? Okay, then you have the foundations done and you decide, no, we don't want the wall there. We want it here, and we want, a new set of French doors on the other side instead. The builder doesn't go, okay, no problems. I told you a price, so I'll just do it for that price. He says, okay, well, this is what the extra cost is going to be. There's a good builder anyway.
A modification,
So
I've been there.
And advisors typically are nowhere near as clear as this. You need to be as explicit with your fees. So that's why I set the scene early. Don't imply, be explicit. The more explicit you are, the better positioning you have with a client, the less fee conscious they are, and the more they'll listen to you. But I don't know, advisors across all denominations tend to pull themselves back. It's the moment of hesitation as you're putting this fee forward. And that's really super important.
Yeah, for sure. It's about managing expectations, client expectations, and sort of for them to understand the work that goes into delivering the advice that you've got to deliver as well. And so that's where I think that radical transparency can really help. And I sometimes think advisors, they're so good at what they do and they've been doing it for such a long time that they perhaps underestimate the value that they're giving. Now, of course, not all advisors, but I have come across a few that just, because it's second nature to them.
Every advisor I've ever spoken to underestimates the actual value they provide. Now, the degree will vary. And I'm going to say the same thing for myself. It's so easy to do. It's how we're psychologically wired. So it's super important to always be looking at this and to, in my opinion, have an advisor yourself, because you can't be objective about your own circumstances. That's why your clients come to you. That's the real value that all advisors provide at the core. You can't be objective about whether you're actually doing this stuff well enough and being honest about it, just like your clients can't. So we all need advice.
So I was just about to refer back to the poll and it's disappeared, but it seemed like a combination of, here we go, bundling up everything into one and, and also charging per piece of work that's done, but no one's charging an hourly rate.
Look, so hourly rates are not generally a good model. I'm reluctant to bundle everything into one. Certainly for your base offering, I think that's the right way to do it. But if you're doing additional project-driven work, and this is really where advisors can double their revenue, right? And we've helped so many of them do it. There's so many areas that you can go deeper and clients will be more than willing to pay for. But when you're delving into this, it's important, I believe, to have a segregation between your base service model and the additional work that you're doing, right? Because otherwise, if you're always bundling it together in your annual fee, then you may have, because it's different value translation for each thing. And so if you mix it together, value can get mixed. And if someone challenges the project that you're working on, then all of a sudden you can end up losing the client, on an ongoing basis, rather than going, well, you need to do it, you want to do it, but you've decided not to. So we're going to park that and, I'll keep bringing it up with you every year. Otherwise, if you bundle it together, you can end up losing the client. Anyway.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's back to your builder analogy. There's been a change, a modification, and so you need to pay for the additional work that it's going to take to deliver that modification. And I think that that's potentially a nice segue into the other foundational building block to grow your business in terms of working with the right clients and finding the right clients. And how do you determine who is the right client for you?
Look, I think, again, same thing. People are too specific on the rational rather than the subconscious versions of this. Who's the right client? Well, how do they behave? What do they look like? What's their personality? How are they going to interact with you? What do they value? So I think when you actually dig deep enough with any advisor, they'll always tell you, they'll all have slightly different variations of a similar definition. For me personally, I only want to work with people who I actually have a relationship with. If we don't care about each other, I'm just not interested, right? If we don't get along, if there's not a mutual connection, meaning is one of the 5 things I value most in my life. So my relationships need to have meaning. So the more deeply you understand your key drivers and what the business is actually doing, the business should always be an expression of you. This is how you create fundamental alignment in your energy levels as well, which, by the way, is the most important resource that you have in a professional services firm. So the right clients are really about who they are, what they look like, how they interact with you. Now, I don't have time to go through all of this. As I said, I could speak literally on, for weeks on each of these individual topics. But we have what I call a go, maybe, no traffic light system, where I kind of identify the key outs for working with clients in any of the businesses that I'm part of. So do you resonate with Baz? If no, then don't work with us. If you're not sure, then talk to some of our clients. And if you resonate with them, then chances are you will. You just haven't worked out what you've got yet. So I kind of go through this mechanism, and all advisors need to do the same thing. The question that I would ask you is, are you joining your client's business or are they joining yours? And almost always, so much of the behavior of advisors is they're acting as if they're joining the client business. No, they're joining yours. It's on your terms, your value. You're the one that creates the value, not the client. The money that they pay you will never come anywhere near close to the value you're creating and the impact in their life. And if you don't understand that and recognize it, then you've got a major problem in your business model. Okay. And so the deeper you go in connecting those dots, the better everything else runs.
I'm hearing what you're saying, but just say I've got a book of 100 clients and maybe 50 of them are just hard work. They're not quite getting the value proposition that I'm delivering. They're questioning everything, constantly having to sort of put out fires. But that, it's half my book. So what you're saying is, work with the ones that are totally understand what I'm delivering and, are easy to deal with, and we're really aligned, and they trust me, I trust them. We're working together towards an end goal. But then I'm going to lose half my book potentially. So whilst it all sounds good in theory, how do you do that in practice?
Okay, well, I've helped many advisors do these exact things. So I would say actually what it's going to look like is 2 things. Half the client base isn't engaging in your terms or paying you the right way or whatever, right? So you're probably undercharging across all of your client base, and that's why you're worrying about whether you can actually keep going if you lose half your clients. So that's just a general observation. So you charge more, right? But the reason that 50% of your clients are not acting in the way that you would want them to be, maybe only 20 to 30% of that 50% is acting that way because they're the wrong clients. Okay. The other 70% of that 50% is acting that way because you were not explicit enough in your engagement. You haven't kept them accountable. You haven't set the terms. You haven't taken the right positioning. So in other words, you've never given them a chance to be your ideal client because you didn't act definitively enough and you weren't explicit enough. So what we do is we get you to go through your entire client base. In that scenario, you're probably going to put up your fees, right? You will have some of those clients leave, even the ones that you think may be in the ideal category. You're going to re-engage with them on definitive terms. You'll probably lose 25 to 30% of those clients. So your 100 clients goes to 70, but now all of them are paying you more. So your overall revenue goes up. And more importantly, everyone's now behaving. Now their perception of value has now exponentially increased. So your organic referral rate, which is for every 100 clients, how many net new clients do you get a year as a consequence of just being a referral from those clients? That goes up dramatically. So on average, it's 2 to 3%, right? All of a sudden, that's now 15 to 20%. So your growth rate's kicked on, your compliance burden's less, your cost to serve is less because you have less clients, your overall revenue's increased. So that's how you would structure, those things.
And I guess you're more efficient because you're not putting out fires all the time as well. You've got happy clients, as you say, that are behaving. So you're not on the phone sort of trying to justify or placate or manage client expectations. You've got everyone under control, so to speak.
Yeah, look, I talk about interventional conversations. You need to be having interventional conversations with your clients about pricing, about their actions, ultimately, like I said, you're there to help them have a better outcome in their life. And if they're not going to take it seriously, then they're not investing in their outcome. So if you're not holding your clients accountable to that, are you actually doing the best job for them? So if you're not sitting them down and going, hey, look, I want to have a chat because I've got some concerns about, our ability to help you get this value. You're not getting back to us on time. It feels like you're indecisive. I want to sit down and talk about it. What are the issues? How do we get there? And by the way, if you can't, you shouldn't be engaging with them. Don't just sit back and go, oh, well, I tried, and so I might as well collect the 10 grand from them. No, that will always hamper your business. So I actually just put into some slides in case we'd use them. So I might just bring this up very quickly. This just happened to be an analysis for a business that I'm looking at, this morning. So, in this case, we've got, $4.4 million in base fees. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. There's 598 clients, average revenue per client, 7,300. We've done a full analysis. We've gone through literally every single client, how they've engaged their clients, etc. So I won't go into all of that. But the gist of it is we're going to change the pricing. And overall, the net revenue will go up by 20%, but you're going to lose a whole bunch of clients. We're going to introduce a minimum cost to serve and things like this. So a 51% reduction in clients for a 21% reduction in revenue. Now that exact scenario translates to a 25 to 35% net increase to the earnings before interest and tax for this business. So think about it. Less work, more revenue. But more importantly, because I'm not just about extracting as much dollars from your clients as you can, every engagement is now deeper. Every client is happier. Their perception of value is higher. The price tension they feel is higher, which translates to their value. So the referral rate's higher. You're doing less, less. You're not trying to run around covering all your bases. Your compliance burden's far less. And honestly, getting this balance right is one of the most important things that a business can do. And often it's very difficult to do because you can't be objective about how well you've done these things. Okay.
So Baz, just one of the comments in the chat was that it was a bit blurry, the quality of the image. So maybe we can send that through post the event to people that are on the line. Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing, just while we're talking a bit of housekeeping, I haven't seen any questions come through yet, and that's fine. I'm happy to keep asking Baz all the questions, but if anyone does have any questions for Baz, feel free to put them in the Q&A because we can definitely address them, or otherwise I'm happy to just keep on asking you questions, Baz, because there's plenty more that we can cover.
I'm here for your benefit. I want to share this stuff with you. I think advisors are far more valuable than they give themselves credit for. So the reason I do this is because I can't let you guys just not be as valuable as you can be. I mean, I can't help it. I won't say it's my passion, it's my obsession. So look, ask questions. None that I haven't been asked 100 times before, I can promise you.
So I think just on the whole client, books, size of book, dealing with the right clients, I think that's a nice segue into referrals. And, there's lots of different opinions on the importance of referrals and who your referral source should be. what a good quality referral looks like. So I'd love to sort of pick your brain in relation to your insights on referrals.
Okay, so we've actually built an algorithm which will help us determine the
Of course
organic
you have.
referability of an, yeah. Well, I did say I'm a nerd. So look, I'm gonna actually bring up some snippets from our dashboard that we've created. So please ignore the numbers. It's just going to give a visual reference to the key things that determine, referrals. Now, before we do that, what I'm going to say to you is referrals are the most important measure, in my opinion, of your overall engagement and pricing and value articulation. All right. So even if you don't want to be growing your business because you've reached the point where, you're very happy with that balance point, you should still be getting significant referrals. I mean, that's disrupting your business because the more referrals you get, you can keep the same number of clients, but just make them better every year. So you can disrupt your own business. But even so, it's an indicator always of how well you're doing on each of these key measures. So let me just bring it up. So there's two kind of components that really drive, and hopefully you can see this. And as I said, don't worry too much about the numbers. That's just an assessment score for an individual advisor. So there's two sides to getting a referral. One is the client being willing to make the referral. Okay, so they have to get over their fear of experience, and there's a whole lot of determining factors. Then the other side is that referral needs to be successful. So in other words, your client has said to their next door neighbor, look, stop talking about this stuff, get to work, call Jim, he's awesome. And then that person has to actually pick up the phone, make the call, book the appointment, right? So there's some, I guess, key drivers that determine the success rate of each side of those things. So at the moment, what I've got up on the screen is what we call the amplifiers. So being found, do you have an online presence? Can people find you if they search by name? Referrals typically are not to a firm, they are to a person. And I want people to really understand this. So, if you go and type your name into Google, what do you find? Right? And if you don't find a lot, that's actually vastly decreasing the success rate of your referrals, and you don't even know. So can you see pictures? Can you see video? Is there a website? Is your LinkedIn profile coming up on screen? So being found, being known, can you see who you are? Are you a real person? What's your message? What's your reason? We talked about why and the context. This bypasses that conscious, subconscious barrier. How well do you tell your story? How well do you tell your client stories? So obviously I don't have time to get into each of those metrics, but this will just give you an idea. So that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is your client engagement. So how well have you mastered the aspects of client engagement? And so there's about 1,000 different measures that we kind of fit in behind the scenes here, but they're summarized in these ways. So price pressure. So the tension that you create in the payment of fee for the value you generate. Advisors almost always avoid creating price tension with their client. So they're pricing down from that point. And that has a massive reduction in the overall value perception that they have across their client base. Not only that, it affects profitability and ability to go deeper with clients. It affects referral rate, obviously, to a dramatic degree. So if we talked about the example that was a bit fuzzy before, but hopefully you at least got the gist of it. Not only are we going to increase the price tension with the clients, we're going to reduce the number of clients that the business has, increase the overall revenue, but these guys have got like a 1.5% organic referral rate. So for every 100 clients, they're getting 1.5 clients in a year. That will go to above 15% at the same time as they're increasing their price. So all of a sudden the business is now growing and the referrals are getting better. So price pressure is super important. Relationship status, are you on the same level with them? How do you speak with them? Do they feel like they're a partner of yours? Engagement language, the sentence syntax, the words that you use, how definitive you are in the things that you state, especially things like fees, pricing, value, and contextual sequence. And I gave you a little bit of an insight into best contextual sequence before when we talked about value proposition, but bundling it with, your reason, then the value, and then expectations. And there's a whole bunch of different triggers that we've researched and discovered ultimately change the dynamic. So hopefully that will give you a bit of an idea of, some of the key measures. And interestingly enough, asking for referrals doesn't even rate on our scale. Okay, so
Why
I've
is
heard so
that?
many good.
Like, that's surprising. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but why would not asking for referrals work?
Because if you're not doing the other things, it has almost a negligible impact. By the way, asking your client for help without an expectation of return, but in a non-business context, will actually lead to getting more referrals. So, I don't know, there's a million ways that you can ask your clients for help. It could just be writing a review for you on Google Places or on LinkedIn or whatever. So, it's interesting. We've done plenty of studies on this. Almost all of the advisors in the top quartile of advisors we've researched that get the most referrals don't actually ask for them.
Okay, so this is really great because if I've got a question around what is the most effective way you've seen having existing clients refer business. Like, business to business is easy, but what about clients referring? Like, what's the secret?
Well, they're all the things that I had up on the screen. So none of them in isolation will lead you to getting there. What I would say is, if I were to pick the secret to leapfrogging your business forward, it's always getting the balance right between value articulation, pricing, minimum cost to serve, and then really translating that value to that client base. And almost every business, well, in fact, every business I've ever looked at could make a major leap forward by, doing those exact things. Now, at the same time, you increase your price, you're more specific on your value, you drop off the clients that aren't ideal, or you have an interventional conversation with them, the whole value perception across the whole client base goes up exponentially. And so what happens as a consequence of that? Referrals. Okay, and yes, client referrals are, in my opinion, the best source of business. If you're getting it right, it's far better than getting, referrals from an accountant or a center of influence or anyone else. Exponentially better.
So if I could paraphrase, you're saying that the clients, if they see the value, they feel like they're getting a lot of great value, they're happy to pay more for it, and then they're also going to go and refer clients like themselves to you because they're so happy with the value that they're getting. Is that kind of where you're headed with this?
Yeah, look, as I said, there's a lot of different components to this, especially with your client engagement, but price is a major element, and honestly, most often the one that, people haven't got right. And so if you think about it, if you're forced past, and I'm actually going to bring up a little slide here because I think this really kind of helps to understand this, if I can. Just bear with me 1 second. I skipped ahead instead of going back. All right, so perceived value. The more you charge someone for a value, for a service or a value, or for a good or an item, the greater the perceived value. Now, I'm making generalizations here, right? Not everyone works quite the same way for different product sets or whatever, but for advice, this is pretty universal. And so the more you charge, the greater the perception of value, right? Up until a pain threshold. So if you haven't got your client to their individual pain threshold, then you're not creating this moment where they've got to step back and go, oh, that's expensive. What am I really getting out of this? Is it worth it to me? And if you take them beyond that point, then they have to consciously and subconsciously, so it helps merge those, oops, sorry, I just punched the microphone, helps merge those two things together. And it's at that point that you actually start to get referrals. Now, there is a diminishing return, but interestingly enough, this is different depending on, all clients. So think about a standard deviation here, right? So everyone should recognize this from back in their university days. So we've got a normal bell curve here. So, you've got some people on the far left, you've got some people on the far right, and then you've got most people in the middle. So all things being equal, everyone will have a different sensitivity to price and value based on their circumstance, but it fits a standard bell curve. The problem is that most advice firms are pricing for that bottom left end of this diagram. So they're not getting price tension, right? And so yes, they'll have very few people complain about price or disengage on price, right? And they think that's the right price point. No, it's not. Because it means that most of your clients, you haven't actually got them to that point where they're feeling price tension. And therefore, their perceived value's lower, they take you less seriously, and they're certainly going to be less inclined to refer to you. I know this is initially counterintuitive, but once you actually go through it, I think everyone kind of gets this point.
Yeah, I just noticed we're a couple of minutes out of time. There was one quick question, so I thought I might try and squeeze it in. We might get kicked off, but somebody wanted to know what your thoughts were on timesheets in financial planning businesses.
Look, as far as timesheets go, or keeping a track of timing, as you hopefully know, analytical is one of my personality traits. So I like to know what's being done. And so it can help you to understand, where the bottlenecks in your business are. There's a good book called The Goal by Eli Goldratt. He was supply chain analytics. So if you're a nerd like me and you want to suss it out, this made a big difference in my own financial planning business. And he talks about capacity constraints. So look, keeping a timesheet can help you understand capacity constraints and, where things are happening. But if you take it too far, it can also be a disenfranchisement for your team and for your, the people working in your business. And it's certainly got nothing to do with the value you provide. Okay, I want people to understand this. Time spent does not equal value given.
Yeah.
Okay, certainly not in an advice-based scenario.
Well, that's fantastic, Baz. I think so. Just for me anyway. They haven't given me a second follow-up, so let's say it did. I was going to ask a final poll question, but I think given we've run out of time, I won't. I just want to thank you so much for your insights. I hope that people on this virtual meeting will take away 1 or 2 points to sort of look to integrate into their practice. But as always, I found it another couple of little new nuggets of information. So really, really insightful. Thank you so much.
Look, absolute pleasure. It was pretty difficult to answer those in a short period of time. If people want to reach out and ask me questions, LinkedIn is a great place to do it. I have a magic philosophy of you ask me and I answer. Look, I'm just happy to help and I'm happy to share. Just expect me to ask you questions so I can learn from you at the same time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
A pleasure, everyone. Thank you.